All right. So one more session before we head into lunch, and it's my pleasure to have a brief fireside chat with Ahmad Chatila, who is the president and CEO of SunEdison, really visionary leader in the solar industry, and has been around the block a number of times and done many things. So we have a lot to talk about. I do want to note that we have about 30 minutes for this session. You haven't had much of a chance yet to ask questions of the people on the stage. You'll get many more chances to do that throughout the rest of the conference, but I do want to reserve a few minutes at the end of this conversation to let you ask a couple of questions to Ahmad. So get questions into your head as we're chatting, and just stick your hand up at the end when I give you the mark, and we'll be happy to take a few questions. So, Ahmad, welcome. I would like to start with a bit of a sort of walk through history. We were talking about this before we walked out here. You and I met first in 2009. You had recently become the CEO of MEMC at the time. You came by the Green Tech Media office, which was this tiny office above an unlicensed cat shelter in Harvard Square. And you asked us, if I were going to do something big and bold, what would I do? And we gave you a bunch of really not that bold ideas about wafer manufacturing and like things to do to acquire more module assembly capacity. And then you went and bought SunEdison, which at the time was viewed as a totally revolutionary move, and then has turned out to be clearly one of the best decisions that anybody's made in any big solar company, because now you are SunEdison. So I guess walk us through from that point when you started 6 years ago to today, both the transition of the company and what you think that reflects about how the market has transitioned over that time.
Yeah, well, thank you for the opportunity. First of all, when I looked at buying SunEdison, I didn't do it because I was visionary. I did it because I was scared. What happened is I worked in semiconductors for 18 years, and I knew technology roadmaps. I had a feeling for it. And if you look at solar cells today, the most advanced is things that we have phased out when I went into the solar, the semiconductor industry, like diffusion. We stopped using it a long time, like dopant diffusion, for example. And I visited a lot of companies. I was telling you just there that I visited 150 companies to just learn in 3-4 months. And I got scared from looking at manufacturing in China and elsewhere. And because of that, I was worried that selling wafers will crush us. The second thing I recognized right away, that this is not a technology play. This is really an energy play. And my view is if solar ceases to exist, the world wouldn't care. There's so many other sources. In semiconductors, if silicon ceases to exist, the world as we know it wouldn't exist. There won't be cell phones, there won't be this TV, there won't be communication, there won't be planes. The way we know them today, they just won't exist. But solar, on the other hand, wouldn't exist. And I felt that we have to push hard to make solar competitive with other things. So that's why we did it. We did it because we were worried about our core business, and we felt that this is an energy play, and we have to do it the right way, which is being really an owner, at that time developer, and then an owner of power plants.
Do you feel like that's still true today, that if you were to remove solar from the equation, the world would go on as it ever has? Are we at the point now where it actually is necessary, or are we still working toward that?
Solar is still not necessary, but I think it has incredible future. There's no question about it. It's such a mega trend. All renewables, actually, all renewables, including wind. If you look at solar today, the panel costs around 50 cents in China, and that's without any overhead. It will be probably 30 cents by the end of the decade, and that's based on our own roadmap, which we're vertically integrated. And if I project to 2020 with dreams and ideas, it will be 20 pennies. At 20 pennies, that means you can power a home in the US at $5,000 fully. And you have a storage on the side, which also be cheap and low cost. So it's such a mega trend. It's a huge disruptor. Actually, if you look at our work today, we're going to announce some nice things about rural electrification. We think it's going to be a major also trend. And it's driven really by solar becoming low cost and storage becoming low cost.
Well, I wanted to get into that at some point, so now is as good a time as any. So SunEdison is among the few sort of big solar companies in the world that has made what seems to be a serious strategic push, not just a push for the good of humanity, toward actually doing business in rural electrification, particularly in India, but I presume elsewhere as well. Can you talk a little bit about the barriers that have stopped that from being a big market, big opportunity for a solar company in the past, and how you see it changing?
Actually, I want to ask a question. Raise your hand if you have worked on rural electrification in Africa or India or anywhere the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Actually, there's around maybe 20 people in the room. Well, look, I meet a lot of executives who really started their career trying to change the world in those places. And at that time, the technology that they had and the business models were not developed yet. But now with solar becoming much lower cost and hence distributed energy is available, generation is available, and also storage cost is coming down, now we have the technology. But usually you never win big with technology. If you look at Uber, taxi's been around forever, and download speeds on cell phones been there too the last few years. So the business model innovation is what made it happen. And I think now we have some ideas on some business models. One of them that we think is going to work in a big way, and it's going to be massive in nature. A big piece of rural electrification is there's no off-taker that you can get capital to fund your projects. So what we're doing is we are signing contracts with wireless towers companies who are really large in scale and have great credit rating, and do 10-year contracts with them. And from there, we build a power plant, and then we power the communities around. And those are like 50 kilowatt solar systems with 200 kilowatt hour systems. We'll do 100 of these this year of microgrids in India alone. And it will take care of around 1 million people or 500,000 people. So we have gotten now to the unit economics, and the funding for them is working for us. So we're going to announce some big things the next few days about this issue.
So can you help me put into context this sort of how big you view this market opportunity over the next few years? We talk about, we're talking in gigawatt terms in the US, we're talking in gigawatt terms in the global solar market. Are we talking in gigawatt terms for rural electrification?
Hundreds of gigawatts, because it's like this. First of all, 5 years ago when we started playing with it, it was mostly for charity because we just wanted to do it. I couldn't see that we can leapfrog fossil fuels in these communities, but now I can see it. It's very clear in my head because of the cost and how it's going to be. We're going to be able to do that in those communities. So it will start at a small plant. When you look at the Pareto chart of what people want, they want light first, then a fan, at least in India, and then they want other things. You start with that, but later on you can expand in distributed fashion and give them more and more and more as their per capita income evolve. What we have found also with all these people, they have a lot of money to spend. They're spending it on kerosene and diesel and other things that are not cost competitive. So we think it's going to be in the hundreds and hundreds of gigawatts.
One more question on the rural electrification piece, and then we can move on to other things, which is I know there's a debate to some extent in that world about whether the right way to get electricity to these communities that have been off the grid is to bring the microgrids, distributed generation powered, or to extend the grid to them. It sounds like you're placing your bet primarily on the microgrid style. Is your view that sort of that's the way to electrify the whole world?
I think you need to have a combination in the short term. But in some places, they already have a grid connected to the village, but they're not powering the homes. I mean, in India, when you look at the numbers, supposedly 90% of all villages are connected, but somehow there's 350 million people with no electricity. So you have to really think about it. Why don't they do that? Because the expense of maintaining it and then connecting the whole village and every home is extremely expensive for the society. And they're not going to use as much. So it doesn't make sense to do it. And especially when they have other places in the country where they have to elevate the amount of electricity generated for manufacturing sector and other places. So I believe that rural electrification and microgrids have a significant role to play.
Great. Let's keep talking about international markets, but let's go back to the grid-connected world. SunEdison's active in lots of different markets, basically active in all the major emerging solar markets. Maybe can you list off for me, say, the top 3 markets outside the US that you think are the most exciting for growth over the next 5 years for solar?
For solar, I would say the most exciting for us is China, India, and Brazil.
And so let's start with China then. China, historically, it's been really hard to do business in China if you're not a Chinese company. Some companies have tried. First Solar had this 2-gigawatt Inner Mongolia project that they were working on that didn't come to fruition. To my knowledge, basically nobody's had a whole lot of success doing business in China in solar, not being a Chinese company. You think you can get around that?
Oh, sure.
And is it through a partnership with a Chinese company? Like, what do you do?
All of the above. You know, at the end of the day, it's like this. If you go into China to do EPC or build a project and sell it, develop a project and build it and sell it to a company there, you're going to get 10, 15 cents a watt. That doesn't make sense. But if you build it and you keep the cash flows and take the cash flows and put them in a Yieldco or a vehicle, then you make a lot of money. You see, the thing is like this. Sometimes you have, the cash flows are a lot more valuable than the being dominated by 3 buyers, because that's what it is. There's around maybe 10 buyers in China. So the market doesn't work when you try to use the thought process that we had in the US. It doesn't work like that.
And okay, so now you're going to jump to the Yieldco part of the conversation that I was going to have at some point anyway. So Yieldco's SunEdison, yeah, well, that's all right. SunEdison's obviously an early adopter in the Yieldco craze that I think I'm fair in saying is something of a craze at this point now. Over the long term, what impact do you see from the fact that there just are more and more Yieldcos over time?
So let's look at a parallel. The parallel is the MLP market. In MLP market, there's around 130, 140 vehicles. They're worth around $500 billion. So it's $500 billion market. And it's limited because there's no infinite amount of pipelines that you can do from Kansas to Houston. So it's a limited set of investments that you can make that are natural resources. Yieldcos, on the other hand, you can put any kind of cash flows in them. Any kind of cash flows, anything. It could be hydro, could be car leasing. If you have long-term contracts that are very clear in the future, you can do anything. So because of that, I think the market for Yieldco is going to continue to expand and in a big way. But not everybody can do it. It's very hard.
Why?
Because not only you have to start with having operating assets, but you have to have an engine that ensures that you have drop-downs afterwards. Because the way Yieldco work is like this. You're telling someone that if you invest in my stock, while I only give you 3% dividends, which is a small number, I will ensure that the stock, though, will grow over time. So your real return is not only that dividend that you're getting from me, which is tiny, but the stock, if you buy it at 50 today, is going to be $100 5 years down the road.
And as interest rates increase in the U.S., do the dividends have to increase as well? You're saying 3% today, but what if interest
I'll get to
rates
that in just a second.
Please.
But to be able to grow that stock price, you need to drop more assets. So if you don't have an engine, you're unable then to really make that commitment. And even if you say it, people might not believe it. And that's why actually, if you look at actually our Terraform vehicle, just by announcing an Atlantic Power asset acquisition of 521 megawatts, the stock has gone from $35 to $42, just by saying and putting it sitting out there that I'm going to drop it in the future. Now, interest rate. So interest rate, if they increase over time, if it abruptly goes up by 300-400 basis points, it will hurt Yieldcos, but it will hurt everything. So in steady state, it won't matter. That product is more efficient than all other investments. However, we think we can absorb 100 to 200 basis points abruptly, and it wouldn't really impact us.
Great. This is also sort of related to Terraform, but more specifically, you know, one of the things that was a big move SunEdison has made among many in the recent years is the acquisition of First Wind. And so now you're in the wind business in addition to the solar business, and so you have sort of a rare visibility into how those two technologies are trending compared to each other. Can you speak to how you see that right now? You know, in what cases, if you're going in and you're saying, we're doing origination here, but just imagine there's a wind resource and a solar resource there, you know, how do they compare against each other, and where do you see that heading?
So first, we start with that it's an energy play. And you cannot go from what I'm comfortable with. I'm comfortable with chip technology, so that means diodes, solar, I get it. So, but it's an energy play, so I have to go where the market is. And our customers are telling us they want firmer power and firm power. They don't want something that is intermittent. So the combination of both gives us that in certain places in the world. That's where the idea started.
Does that mean that you would then co-locate solar and wind in order to provide firm power from a single contract in theory?
You don't have to, because not in every place in the world you have to co-locate them to be able to give that. You can wheel power in some places.
I see. But develop them strategically together so that you can
Totally.
offer firm power.
Also, when you think about it, in the next 20, 30 years, what are the mega trends? Gas is there. Solar cost and wind cost declines, and hence penetration is there. Storage cost is there. Electric vehicle ramps is there. I mean, think about electric vehicles. For 1 million electric vehicles, Model 3 Tesla, this is, I was looking at JB Straubel's presentation, brilliant guy. For 1 million cars, you'll have 75 gigawatt hours of storage and 10 gigawatts of power DC. Well, let's think about it. Today, there's 1 billion cars, 1 billion vehicles operating. The fleet converts every 15 to 16 years. Every car just gets completely converted every 15, 16 years. If you look at ExxonMobil and other forecasters, they say there are going to be 2 billion vehicles by 2040. Let's fantasize and say there's 1 billion cars that are electric vehicle 25 years down the road. Because really, lithium-ion battery is doubling its density every 10 years. And the cost is declining by 70% by 2020. That means cars are going to become very cheap if they're electric vehicles. That means effectively in 25 years, you can have an electric vehicle that can drive 1,000 miles without recharge using the same trends at a cost that is of a battery that is around 80, 90% cheaper than today. Just imagine how it can be, right? So then, if there's 1 billion cars, there'll be 75 terawatt hours of storage and 10 terawatt of power generation. Now let's give you another data point. 96% of the time, we do not use our cars. You have the 75 terawatt hours and 10 terawatt of power generation sitting idle most of the time. You're telling me they're not going to be a Steve Jobs that's one day will think about it and does software to move this around and do a business model that takes advantage of that underutilized asset? I think there will be. I think the biggest thing that's going to happen is these kind of mega trends collapsing on each other. Automotive, oil, and it's a tsunami. And the only thing I do is I hope it doesn't crush me. I don't know if I'm going to be able to take advantage of it, but I'm scared. I look at this stuff and I'm scared. I really am paranoid. I look at this stuff and it really worries me.
In what sense does it worry you? Worries you from the perspective of the CEO of SunEdison or as a ratepayer? What's scary?
When there's mega trends like that, you don't know who wins, really, and how to win. Let's think about it this way. Today you do a residential home, right? 5 kilowatts, $25,000, everybody's happy, you do a lease, you do a PPA, whatever it is. Well, what if it costs only $5,000 to do 10 kilowatts on a home? Why would anybody do a lease? Are you telling me that 20 years from now, someone's going to say, I used to buy a Lexus 20 years ago, or my grandfather used to buy a Lexus, I'm going to buy a Lexus today? They're going to look at that solar panel on a home and say, I will extend my contract with you? I just can't, I don't know. And these things, because we don't have good answers today, and I cannot really start working on something that's going to happen 5 years from now because I don't have the money. I have to work on things that really makes me money today and tomorrow. It scares me because things can change in a disruptive way. Just look at the polysilicon players, the module players, and just imagine where their market caps used to be. And today, all of them combined are not the value of SunEdison, the tiny company out of Bethesda. So really, it really worries me. I hope that we're able to navigate through that and take advantage of the change and not get crushed by the change.
Right. So in case anyone didn't catch that, there was a subtle worry about residual value calculations in residential solar leases, right?
I actually look at them. We have to be data-driven, and we have to be very logical about it. I cannot throw in things that don't make sense. For me, residual value in a utility plant is very clear. People don't want to build more infrastructure. There's only one interconnect site, and there's a land that you own. It is very clear that this has value, and we can debate what that value is. On residential, I have a question mark about it.
Do you worry that people might, and so there's one question as to the end of a 20-year lease, will people renew? But there's a separate question, I think, that is 20 years is a really long time in this market. We don't know what's going to happen, but say we get close to $5,000 well before then, will you not see people strategically defaulting because they can get a better deal in the open market anyway?
I cannot speculate on that. But the strategy of a company doesn't have to be this defensive posture of me being scared that something's not going to be renewed. By being with the customer, you can hold their hand and evolve your offering to do other things. There's no reason why you should just sit there idle waiting for the thing to renew 20 years down the road. I think companies that have really good penetration today, they have an angle. They can go sell more things to the customer. And the main thing is to take advantage of that.
So another question for you. It seems over time to me that SunEdison is looking more and more like sort of an innovative IPP, right? You are involved in utility scale solar, utility scale wind. You're involved in distributed solar, which some IPPs are as well. You're dropping assets down into a Yieldco. And on the other side of it, I see most of the traditional IPPs kind of heading in the same direction, if a little bit more slowly. And so I wonder if you're talking 10, 20 years down the line, how do you view differentiation for a company like SunEdison when renewables are mainstream and every IPP is building them?
The way our strength has been the following. We are very agile and we are very data-driven. We are not religious, we're not technology bigots. We don't care if the efficiency of a panel is high, low, medium. We really don't care about that. We don't care if it's solar or wind. So we're data-driven and follow where the market is, and we're very agile and move very quickly. Right now, the way we have designed the company is very important to have consistent cash flows, and Yieldcos and vehicles like that make a lot of sense. So we avoid doing EPC contracts and try to be on a treadmill like that, because these markets come in and out. We like to build cash flows and cash flow streams. That's the game we're playing today.
Mm-hmm. I'll ask one more question, and then I'll open it up to the audience for a few questions, so have yours ready. So let's go back to the international markets, because we jumped around a little bit. You talked about China. We talked a little bit about India off-grid. And then your third market that you mentioned was Brazil. So tell me about Brazil and why that's a real opportunity.
Well, in all these markets, the population is large and the economy continues to evolve. Even if they have issues or not, the GDP increases are interesting. Brazil has been 80% hydro, but they have drought, and that's going to take them 3 to 4 years just to fill up their reservoirs. And the government's starting to pull back a little bit on being very aggressive on the auctions. So because of that, solar and wind are very, very, very interesting. Very interesting.
Great. Okay, let's take a few questions from the audience. Raise your hand, and we'll have somebody walk around to you with a mic. I see one just up in the front here. There's a mic coming around to you from the back.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Very happy that you're into rural electrification. We have some projects in Ghana. When you mentioned your three top countries, you mentioned China, India, and Brazil. I was disappointed Africa is not one of them. But in any case, my question is this. What do you think are the drawbacks to working in Africa? And why is Africa not one of your biggest markets? Because electrification rates there are the lowest in the world.
So the way we're going to go after Africa is we're going to do rural electrification in a big way. We're going to try to get concessions in certain countries like Senegal and Ghana and elsewhere and go after it. We were very successful in Latin America. We were ahead of other people. We sent 2 people in 2011, and we built a great franchise. So then we said, why don't we go after Africa? And I'll give you one statistic about Nigeria. Nigeria has 12 gigawatts worth of installed capacity. Only 6 can be operated, and they're only utilizing 2.5 for 170, 180 million people. So we are humbled to say we don't understand how to be successful. So we studied for a year. Actually, I had 5 of our most brilliant up-and-coming leaders tried to study it, and we all agreed. And we got experts, people from Nigeria and from Ghana and elsewhere to educate us. We can't really go all out on it. And Africa is a continent, of course. But we're going to do rural electrification. I think we can have significant and very profitable business doing rural electrification in Africa. Especially, and we like West Africa, irrespective of Ebola. We like West Africa the most. Ghana, Nigeria, all the way to Senegal and those countries. We also like a little bit of East Africa, but we like those countries very much. Large populations, growth of the economy, so on and so forth.
Great. Next question, right there. There's one in the front here. He had a hand up before.
Thank you. My question is SunEdison plans to be an energy company. Do you plan to renewable energy, wind, and what do you plan to do with waste energy?
We don't have any plans on waste energy at this time. When we go after some things, we have to go in full force, and it has to be scalable in a big way. So I like solar, I like wind, hydro in some places, and we look at gas to open up more renewable energy. If we find that by having a gas power plant will open up a huge market, we might look at it. I'm actually more towards renewable energy in a big way, but we're open to those. On waste and biomass, we have not looked at it because it's hard to scale a business. It is very hard to really say, I'm going to be the top company in biomass around the world. I can say that I would like to become that person in solar and wind. I cannot say it in waste energy at this moment.
Great.
But we'll never know. It might change.
Another question about 2 rows back there.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Ganesh from Vikram Solar. Just recently there was an announcement about big plans in manufacturing in India. Could you just tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So as you know, there's a big push in policy in India called Make in India, and we are big supporters of that. Actually, in 2010, November, I showed the chief minister of Gujarat at the time, now the prime minister, a plan to put significant manufacturing there. And I almost went to Vibrant Gujarat in January of 2011, and I didn't go because they wouldn't give me an offtake on it. But now India have really shown that the cost of solar is competitive with imported coal. And because of that, manufacturing makes sense. And Gujarat actually is a place where I think manufacturing can work no matter which industry you're in. There's Ford Motor Company and many other companies. So because of that, I'm excited about it, very much.
I want to make one note before we go to, there's a question in the back there, which I forgot before, and I was remiss to do so. Ahmad just joined Twitter, and he's in a competition with a fellow executive at SunEdison about who can get more followers. So what's your name?
At Ahmad R. Shatila.
At Ahmad R. Shatila.
And now they're both public. My competition was not public, but because I was going to surprise him with the win.
Oh, I see. I'm sorry. Well, all right. So we're going to get him to win anyway. It's called the GTM bump.
I just started a week ago. I have only 23 followers, so it's a huge number.
There's 600 in the audience here. We'll see how many get there. One question in the back.
An acquisition in the energy storage space, which I thought was very interesting and sort of a shot across the bow for the energy storage space overall. Could you elaborate a little bit more on your overall strategy in energy storage?
So we have Tim Derrick somewhere in here maybe. He is the head of advanced solutions, so you should talk to him. Storage is another mega trend. The cost today, we have to be careful, like cost of the cell, the overall equipment, the balance of the plant, warranty, all that. Let's say it's around $600 per kilowatt hour. It's going to be less than 200 or 250 by 2020. It's a massive mega trend. So what we're interested in is rural electrification. We're interested in residential. We're interested in commercial application. We're interested in ensuring that certain value creation at a utility level is also taken care of. And so we're interested in it across the board, just like solar. Storage is 5 years behind where solar is. If you go back to 2010 or 2009, that's where storage is today. It's going to be a significant disruptor, more important than solar 5 years from now, by 10 times more important. Because for the first time in our lives, now we can store in a significant way electricity. We've never been able to do it. So it's a huge, huge change. And it's going to disrupt the wind markets, the utility markets, everything.
You mentioned basically every sector of storage there and said we're interested in all those things, as well as solar and wind and other renewables and on-grid and off-grid in the US and international markets.
We are the largest renewable energy developer in the world. So for us, I mean, we have 3,000 employees. We're going to do more than 2 gigawatts this year, more than around 3 next year. So we have significant activities. So
tell me something you're not interested in.
I'm not interested in nuclear.
Nuclear?
I think half our executives will resign the company. I'm one of them if we go into nuclear. It's actually something it's dangerous. We always say it's incredibly safe, but we just had 3 accidents in 3 advanced societies. So for me, I'm not a buyer on the idea that it's safe. I don't want to be in it. I will never touch coal. I'm not against coal, and I'm not against people who work on coal. My kids were born in hospitals were powered by coal. We pushed southern states in the country to go to coal so that we are not reliant on gas 30 years ago, 40 years ago. It's not fair for us to attack them. However, Now we know it's not a good technology and something a lot cleaner and lower cost. Why the hell do I have to go and invest in coal? So I'm not going to do it. I will look at gas. It will open up a lot of markets for renewables. I'm interested in that.
Great. We have time for one final question that I see in the middle, just over here.
Ahmad, in your utility power plants, what percentage are trackers versus fixed tilt today, and how do you see that evolving in the future?
I know you. Well, look, we almost 80% of our utility scale projects are tracker-based, around 1,200 megawatts this year. And one of our major partners, Nextracker, and we have our own internal solution, but we use Nextracker extensively. And Tracker, it has people don't understand it. It is incredibly valuable and very easy to maintain, and I'm not sure why not everybody uses it. Also, the cost has declined significantly for the last 5 years, and the reliability is better, and the O&M cost is negligible difference versus fixed tracking. So it gives us actually an advantage around the world by 10%. Because we don't have our internal manufacturing for modules. Mm-hmm. So we play with that, we do it, we use Flextronics, but our cost is always around a few pennies higher than the Chinese. Tracker is what really makes us a powerhouse in development.
Great. Well, that's all the time that we have. Please join me in thanking Ahmad. It was a great conversation.
Thank you.
And I believe it's lunch.